Welcome to Key Talking Points.
The podcast that makes learning effortless.
No fluff, no jargon, just clear, engaging explanations.
We break down complex topics so you don't have to.
Let's get straight to the point.
Visit keytalkingpoints.com for more. When you think about the most influential figures in corporate America, Kenneth Lay's name is bound to come up. Not necessarily in the best way, mind you, but his story started with anything but scandal. It's a tale of modest beginnings and, honestly, a pretty impressive rise. Lay was born in the small town of Tyrone, Missouri, where he grew up in poverty after his family's general store failed. It's hard to imagine, but his father was a Baptist preacher and the family had to scrape by on very little. That experience, I imagine, had a huge impact on his worldview.
Yeah, and what's remarkable is how quickly he rose above those early struggles. He had this relentless focus on education. By the time he finished high school and got into the University of Missouri, he was already making waves. He earned both a bachelor's and a master's in economics before going on to get his PhD at the University of Houston. I mean, that's dedication.
Absolutely, and you can see how his academic achievements paved the way for his success. After finishing his doctorate, Lay worked at Humble Oil, which later became Exxon. Then he climbed the ranks in various government energy roles before stepping into the private sector. By the early 80s, he joined Houston Natural Gas as chairman and CEO, which eventually merged with Internorth. And voila, Enron was born. The energy powerhouse of the future. Or, well, what seemed like the future.
It's fascinating how strategic Lay was during that time. Enron wasn't just selling energy, they were redefining the game. Under his leadership, the company embraced deregulation, created new financial models, and adopted innovative, some might even say aggressive growth strategies. It's no wonder they exploded onto the scene as a corporate giant.
But there's this irony in how Lay's approach mirrored broader economic trends. During downturns, his ability to pivot and think creatively drew comparisons to some of the top executives we see today. I mean, think about leaders navigating the tech sector during recessions. Similar risks, similar big bets, and for a while, similar successes.
Right, except hindsight's 2020, isn't it? We all know how Lay's story turned out. But at the time, Enron was riding high. They were innovators, market disruptors. You almost forget what was coming down the line.
And yet, looking back, the beginnings of Enron had all the markings of a classic rise-to-power story. A young Kenneth Lay, passionate about economics, building a corporate empire from the ground up. The cracks, though, well, they were just beginning to form.
From the heights of Enron's meteoric rise to the depths of its implosion, the company's story is as much about ambition as it is about deception. Kenneth Lay and his top executives, for a time, seemed untouchable, but under the surface there was a crumbling foundation. They employed incredibly complex financial strategies, including tools known as Special Purpose Entities, SPEs. These were designed to hide the company's mounting losses, shifting debt off the books, and inflating profits in ways the public and investors couldn't easily discern.
It's almost mind-boggling how they pulled it off for as long as they did. By using SPEs, they could inflate profits, pump up their stock price, and keep the illusion of growth alive. It was clever, yeah, but wildly reckless. And the culture of risk-taking at Enron? It couldn't have helped. People were almost celebrated for taking bigger and bigger gambles.
Exactly. Enron cultivated an atmosphere that didn't just tolerate risk, it demanded it. And that culture made it easier to sweep ethical considerations under the rug. You had executives like Lay and Jeffrey Skilling pushing their teams to innovate at all costs, even if it meant bending the rules. And honestly, there were warning signs. But those warning signs were buried beneath this corporate facade of success.
Right? And that brings us to the fallout. When it all came crashing down in 2001, it was devastating. 20,000 employees found themselves jobless, many of them losing their entire life savings in the process. Investors, too, they lost billions of dollars. And despite all of this, Lay kept asserting his innocence, claiming it was just market forces or rogue executives at play.
Which, let's be honest, rings pretty hollow when you look at the numbers. Between 1998 and 2001, Lay personally pocketed over $220 million in cash and stock. At one point, he even sold off 1.7 million shares of Enron stock. But all the while, public statements from the company urged employees to keep buying. Lay told them he believed in the company's future while quietly offloading his own shares.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast, isn't it? The rhetoric versus reality. He pushed optimism, persuasion, and loyalty to the company, but he clearly wasn't putting his own skin in the game. And when you think about the pressure employees were under, believing their careers and their retirements were tied to Enron's success, it's infuriating.
Infuriating, yes, but also tragic. This was much bigger than just an executive scandal. It shook the very foundation of public trust in corporate leadership. We hadn't seen anything like this before, except maybe the collapse of WorldCom soon after. Leadership failure, poor regulatory oversight. Both of those cases taught us hard lessons about what not to do.
And yet, those lessons came at an extraordinary cost. Thousands of lives were turned upside down, and the backlash. It wasn't just about lost money. It was about trust. Lost trust in businesses, in markets, and those leading them. Lay's legacy, if you can even call it that, became a textbook example of how bad leadership can ripple through society.
Kenneth Lay's story took another dramatic turn when he passed away in 2006, just months before his sentencing. It wasn't only an abrupt end to his personal saga, but also a blow to those seeking closure. Under the principle of abatement ab initio, his conviction was vacated, leaving behind a legal loophole that many saw as a frustrating, unfinished chapter in the Enron narrative.
Yeah, and legally it left this strange gap. Without a conviction in place, there was this unresolved sense of justice for the thousands affected by the collapse of Enron. It's frustrating, really. Even today, it's a reminder of how fragile the legal system can feel in cases like these.
Exactly. But Lay's legacy isn't just about the collapse itself, it's also about everything that his actions catalysed. His extensive political contributions, estimated at nearly $6 million, mostly to Republican candidates, meant he had influence in some very high places. His connections to figures like George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and even Bill Clinton created this environment where, let's be honest, checks and balances felt a bit skewed.
Right. And those ties definitely raise questions about how much his reach insulated Enron from scrutiny or oversight for so long. I mean, Lay wasn't just a businessman, he was a political player. It's no surprise, really, that his actions contributed to such widespread cynicism about corporate motives and political influence.
But here's the thing. While Lay's story may have ended, the fallout from Enron's collapse ushered in some hard-hitting changes. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 is a direct result of the scandal, introducing stricter requirements for corporate transparency and accountability. Things like mandatory CEO certifications of financial statements and protections for whistleblowers, those were groundbreaking.
Yeah, it was a wake-up call for corporate America. Before Enron, the idea that a company of that size could implode due to fraud wasn't something most people even considered. Sarbanes-Oxley made it clear. Companies couldn't operate in the shadows anymore. Accountability wasn't optional.
And yet, despite these reforms, the question remains, have we truly learned from Kenneth Lay's legacy? While the rules have changed, scandals still happen, exposing the same fundamental tension between profit and ethics. It's a balancing act, isn't it?
It is. Lay's story stands as a cautionary tale, not just for executives, but for regulators, investors, and even employees. It's a reminder of what's at stake when leadership fails. The personal, financial, and societal cost of unchecked ambition.
So when we think about Enron, we can't just see it as a corporate disaster. It's a case study in how systems break down, how power and influence can cut both ways. But maybe, just maybe, it's also a lesson in how we can do better.
And that's what it comes down to, doesn't it? Doing better, learning the hard lessons and making sure they stick. It'll never undo the damage, but it might just prevent the next Enron.
And that's all for today. Thanks for joining us as we unravelled this part of corporate history. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.